right, welcome back to the Morning Brushback. This is episode 63. We've got a awesome guest today. So, Bobby, number one, how you doing? Number two, who's our guest today?
I am fantastic, as always. Our guest today is former teammate of both of ours and current hitting coach, collegiate professional hitting coach Dan Hennigan of Brain and Barrel Hitting. Find him on Instagram at brain_and_barrel. Really good talk today. What'd you think of it?
I mean, a lot of really deep insight. So what Dan does is really interesting. He works with lots of like first rounders, like guys in pro ball, like some secret names that he can't reveal. I know everyone like, ooh. No, but Dan really does work with a lot of high level hitters now. He was just in Fort Myers, got flown down there to work with some really high level high school players. So he's become a really sought after guy. It's not surprising. He's a really, really smart dude. He was one of our favorite teammates. Just a guy who has a really high baseball IQ and really understands the game. So it's not surprising that people are really, trying to get in touch with him, and he's pretty booked up, it sounds like.
Yeah, Dan's always been at least on the baseball field, just a guy you want to be around to listen to how he has to explain the game, his perspective on the game. And it's definitely no coincidence that he's excelling in the hitting world how he is. He's just not as prominent of a name yet because he's not loud on Twitter and Instagram how maybe myself is or you are. Definitely less prominent than Dan Blewett is, because Dan Blewett is the coach of the stars on YouTube and Twitter.
Well, we talked about this. I mean, Dan is really making a name for himself where it counts, right? Like he has agents sending players to him. He's got pro organizations sending players to him rather than wasting all of his time on social media. So I applaud him for this. So when you talk about prominence, internet prominence, which is something we talk about in the discussion, internet prominence is not the same as actually succeeding in the real world, right? You can have a lot of Instagram followers or Twitter followers and still just be really scraping by, or just kind of be just smoke and mirrors. So yeah, I mean, he's got a lot going on, and he really shared a lot of that depth of knowledge today. I mean, some of the things that stuck out for me, obviously a lot of the approach stuff and just treading lightly, not trying to pick apart a hitter's swing when he's in a tournament, right? You can't just overhaul a guy when he's right there. We talked a lot about, plate discipline, approach, but also just like what are some of the new trends, and is hitting really that new, right? Like everything's kind of been done, and he kind of said, hey, I don't know if there's that much that's actually being new. Sometimes it's just being explained in a different way.
Yeah, he breaks it down really well, and that's part of the appeal of having Dan as your hitting coach, is that he can relate in more than one way, and that's always the difficult task of a hitting coach, is to explain the same thing 10 different ways to 10 different people and get the same result. So I think when you listen to this, you're going to realize that he's far ahead of the curve in being able to relate to hitters and to explain and touch on concepts that might seem new, might seem difficult, but they're actually old school, and they're very, very basic once you break it down.
Yep. And obviously Dan was a pro hitter, played, like you said, played with both of us, and just has a wide range of experience. And he's not a bigger guy. So a lot of times bigger players who just naturally destroy the ball or throw fuel, as pitchers, they don't have to struggle and strive as much. And Dan was a gritty middle infielder who really had to, know the game and know situations and maximize his own ability to be as good as he ended up being. So usually those are the kind of players that become the best coaches. So, Bob, let's jump into it, man. But yeah, this was a great conversation, about 90 minutes. I know we're excited to share it here with you. So without further ado, let's jump into our conversation with hitting coach Dan Hennigan. Well, Dan, thanks for joining us on the show, man. It's good to see you again.
Good seeing you guys, man. I missed you guys. Missed playing with both of you.
You're just saying that. I was a pitcher. We weren't really friends.
Yeah, you don't miss Dan. You don't miss
I have
Dan.
I miss Dan's work ethic. I miss his deadlifts.
I didn't have a work ethic that last 2 years. I was just trying to keep it together.
You
mentally.
and Kulik, man, getting swole. yelling at people for not putting the weights away.
Was I? I don't know. That sounds in character, but who knows?
No, I don't know. I never went in the weight room. I don't know.
Dan knew his place. Position players were not welcome. I mean, position players. Dan, what were your workouts like in college? Or in college, not so much.
In college?
Pro ball. I misspoke.
In pro ball off seasons, it was get yoked. Absolutely enormous. So I'm 5'6" with the cleats on, and probably my fighting weight is probably like 145. So for me to get to 160, those 15 pounds are enormous on this body. So I just was a bowling ball walking around. But then by the end of the year, I would always be back to being a little bitch, honestly. But no, so I would get huge. And I would look like a bodybuilder for a little bit, but it wouldn't make me a better baseball player because I didn't understand functional strength. So I should have just gone to like a spring break Cabo thing. Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
And then my final years, I had so many arm problems, tore labrum twice, bone scope in the elbow, so many arm problems that it became just like injury prevention stuff.
Yeah.
But honestly, I liked when I was yoked and just trying to hit homers and not understanding my game at all.
I like how you said trying. Good. I appreciate you threw that in there because trying isn't, the same as doing.
Well, yeah, no. But I would go up to like guys in spring training, I would like ask people how much they bench and stuff, just how they stack up to me.
Yeah. Well, I do want to get back to that topic because that's I think, a really interesting, especially from a guy who's smaller like you and a guy who's really weak like Bobby,
right?
Is just knowing yourself as a hitter and what you can and can't do, right? I know we're going to talk a lot about things like launch angle and exit velocity and all the different things about the swing.
That's not on the outline.
Listen, Bob, it's going to happen.
Launch angle
But
and
then-
swing velocity. Is that what you said?
No. Bobby being weak. That's what
Bobby being weak is on
Yeah.
the agenda for sure.
I'm sorry. You're right. I glossed over that part of the outline.
But every kid wants to know their numbers and they want to hit the ball harder and then they want to lift it and they want to hit dingers, but a lot of them just can't, like Bobby, right? So you got to know that's where you come in as hitting guys. So Dan, you were just in Fort Myers. Tell us about your trip.
Crazy. I cannot believe I sound so old saying this. I cannot believe how good these kids are. Now, this is the absolute best of the best. And Perfect Game is just turning these kids into little like quasi celebrities already. As I was walking in, there was a kid playing for this team called the Florida Burn.
Hold on, back up. So why were you in Fort Myers? What were you doing there? You were attending some sort of baseball
I just wanted to do it. Like I wanted to get tanner. And so I went south.
You do have a nice glow to you.
Thanks, man. That's that Florida glow. It's a Florida mosquito glow. No, I was there because I have a couple hitters that were playing in the tournament, and they have crazy passionate parents that paid to fly me down and would work with me when they weren't playing, keep them fresh for the agencies and scouts that are watching them. So I was down there just kind of networking, talking to a lot of agencies, I was trying to talk to some scouts, trying to figure out what their team wants. And I found some pretty interesting stuff that maybe we'll dive into later. But these kids are ridiculously good. So I was watching this national tournament, and they got 16-year-olds throwing 96. They had a kid throwing 92 with almost a 2,700 RPM spin rate fastball, which is ridiculous, and sitting it. Kids spitting on mid-80s sliders. That a mid-80s fastball in high school for me was a tough one. And these kids are just spitting on sliders. And stuff. It's crazy how good this level is.
But what percentage of the talent pool were you actually watching there? I mean, it sounds like that's probably like the cream of the crop from all over the country. Is that correct?
Yeah, these kids are freaks. The teams, they're not like I was from Chester County, Pennsylvania. We had a team called the Chester County Crawdads. We were pretty good. We actually had the entire team go play college ball, and a couple of us ended up playing professionally. Joey Wendell was on that team with the Rays. We were good, but there's no local team anymore. Like the team that I had 3 of the hitters on, center fielder from Louisiana, kid from Cali, kid from Hawaii, kid from PA, So like they don't even know each other. They're just showing up. They get handed jerseys. It's crazy. So the
Yes.
1%.
So a little about that tournament is, so my travel organizations is part of a conglomerate, Chicago Scouts Association, which is probably 15 to 18 organizations that send the best of their best to a tryout. They choose the team. I coach the 2022 fall team, so it's like an all-star team essentially.
Yeah, you do.
And of course I do. I mean, they only choose the best coaches they could possibly find. But my team is, Louisville, South Carolina commit, Alabama commits. I mean, it's just a who's who of all-star kids in the area. So it's not what travel ball is when people think like, oh, you play with your buddies in the neighborhood. Like, no, these kids they're going down there to get drafted.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
There's no other reason to go there other than to try and put
get
yourself
drafted or get a late secondary offer, or maybe a leverage offer,
And so for parents or kids who might want to Google what was the exact name of this tournament, or was it?
I think it's called PG National, I think.
Okay. Because I know it's the WWBA.
It's usually in Jupiter. This year,
gotcha.
COVID brought it to Fort Myers.
It's the World Wood Bat by Perfect Game. It's the best tournament. It's an invite only. The Florida Burn actually is usually the favorite in that tournament. That's top 5 national program.
Yeah.
I just want to interject here and say how pleased I am that there's now 2 Dans giving Bobby grief today. I think I can see how it flustered.
This is going to turn on you, Dan. Dan Blewett. This is going to turn on you real quick.
One with hair, one without. So it's coming at Bobby from all angles.
Well, I'm kind of like, I read the tide and I'll jump ship real fast, Dan. I just want to let you know. So there's no loyalty here. I might even turn on myself. You never know.
Bring it. I'm the king of this jungle who could use a match every once in a while. Like, I'm tired of just,
abusing Bobby.
Well, I'm not really tired of it, but a fair fight is always appreciated.
No, I heard. I texted Bobby beforehand and I said I'm going to come in yelling, real hostile from the get-go, no reason. And he said, "Oh, so Dan Blewett."
Classic Napoleon syndrome,
Yeah,
classic.
That's what I do.
Mm-hmm. So when you're working with these kids, like, they're in obviously an important tournament.
Yeah.
And you probably can't do too much and overhaul their swing and screw with them, right? So how do you tread lightly when kids they got some pretty important games, a lot of important people watching them. So what do you do to work with them while at the same time not, getting in their heads?
I treat these guys the same way I treat my pro clients, and that because they're going to be, and that is, I figure out what is going to get them paid. And so what I mean by that is I came up, and the first guy that was actually nice to me in any form of pro ball was named Freddie Bynum. And he played big league time with the Orioles, really good second baseman, middle infielder, solid hitter. And he would always say, like, the mindset has to be money. So figure out why a team's going to pay you. And so then from there, I just kind of took that and found as many different options as possible. I know pretty much what every hitting coach in the country is teaching. I know what almost all of the MLB organizations value. And so I can figure out within all of that, you can kind of grab back different things. Okay, if I use the Dodgers movement of the torso here, and we kind of do what the Yankees like to do with the back leg here, that'll really work for this kid. Whereas another kid might be like me, and he is doing everything perfect as far as what maybe the Mariners are looking for. But it's a fly out to center field every time, where for another person, that's a homer. So why is he still doing that? We got to change that up. So I try to figure out what's going to get these guys paid and then model their game as close to that as possible. But in a tournament like this, I know what the results need to be, and we have a general idea of the type of pitching they're about to face. And I try to just simulate that. I don't get in their head at all about mechanics in a tournament, unless there's just something absolutely glaring. For instance, the one kid was facing this lefty, super athletic lefty, probably high 80s, and he struck out, missed underneath good four-seam fastballs. So I was just saying top knuckle, and what I mean by that is, like, if this is the ball, I wanted him focusing on just breaking the knuckles of the ball instead of down here. That had nothing to do with mechanics, super simple. and he ended up going bananas. And that was such a simple process to the point where he actually hit a double, and his double celebration was going like this. So like it worked for him, but just that mindset. So yeah, I try to just make them comfortable in a game scenario. In the off season, we'll dive in, but not in a tournament like this.
That cue, the top knuckle it makes so much sense to someone that hits or that's been in the game. Like, okay, you're making a physical adjustment by thinking something differently. Whereas somebody who doesn't have a feel like that, what I would consider a bad hitting coach is, okay, well, you're dropping your top hand, or you're doing this early, you're opening up early, so fix that mechanically. It's not, most, especially in-game adjustments, are not physical, like they're mental. Whatever you're doing, if you're way early, you got to think, crush the first base coach. If you're way late, you got to think, hit the third base coach, whatever. Something mental that gets you to change something physical. I mean, that's an awesome example of a coach with an idea that, hey, anything I say to this kid, he's going to take it and multiply it by 10 mentally. So it's got to be simple, and it's got to be something that works without him having to think about it.
Hey, thanks, man. I wasn't always like that. So there was a stretch where, guys would send me video and I would send them an 8-bullet, thing of what we need to feel the next at bat. And that was as short as maybe 3 years ago I was doing that. So I gradually had to make the adjustments myself. But I still see you're right. I was actually at a game, front row, no big deal, got the ticks. But I was at a game that I got flown to, and front row, and I was next to another hitting coach, and he was looking at video, and the guy struck out. And this was a double-A guy, struck out. And the other hitting coach goes, "Oh, he's not doing it right." I said, what do you mean he's not? He's not doing what right? He's not doing what I taught him right. Like, dude, that was a bouncing 12-6 curveball. He swung at a bad pitch. So now this guy is like giving him a hard time about his mechanics and how he lost the backside and all this thing. And no, he lunged because he got fooled. So maybe he needs to recognize pitches better, or know that was an obvious 12-6 curveball moment that he doesn't know about. Why doesn't he know that a 12-6 should be coming then? So I was that person for sure. But I appreciate the compliments now, man.
So to summarize, you were a trash hitting coach just 3 years ago.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But I appreciate that, like everyone else who gets to a high point, you've got a lot. I mean, like, you're really sought after hitting coach. Everyone's still evolving, right? And I think that's your point, is that you still have to learn how to tread lightly and how to not do too much when kids still are just learning even the basics.
Yeah. To the point where my latest dive deep situation here is now figuring out how to get these guys the right mindset. So I have a couple hitters that probably mechanically have swings that I'm not sold on and that don't always work at the highest level. And then I have guys that are absolutely flawless. And I mean that. And I'm very proud of both sides. But two of the guys that I can think of in particular that have, one of them's been in a home run derby. One of them has a World Series ring. These are guys that are accomplished and have very large houses and very nice cars because of the game of baseball. And their swings aren't all that good, but their mindset, the moment they walk into my gym, you can feel their energy versus some of the guys around them. And you were making jokes about King of this Jungle. You can see it with some of these guys, and that matters. And the success is there. And so that's my next thing, is because I got some kid. I have a 4th rounder with the Braves that is just an absolute phenom. He's 19 years old. He's just a freak. And he's going to be in the big leagues. There's no doubt. But he doesn't have that mindset. And that's what's going to stop him from being a household name. And so that's my latest thing, is actually becoming more of a psychologist.
Yeah, I like to say, and I've tweeted this out before, and I want to get into it with you, Dan, a little bit, because I don't understand.
Say Dan. That doesn't mean anything to either of us.
With Henny.
Bald Dan or Dapper Dan? Which one?
I go by Hen Dollars.
So, Henny, I want to get into how. Well, my point is, confidence is the ultimate hitting tool. Like there's guys in the big leagues with awful mechanics. You see all the time. There's very, very high level hitters that have a lot of success that have mechanics you wouldn't teach anybody. But like you said, their confidence is just through the roof. They walk into the box, they have an approach, they know what they're looking for, and they battle and they can barrel. And I've said this on Twitter, and it's baffling to me that you're a hitting coach that has no Twitter persona and doesn't like to battle people on Twitter. And it actually pisses me off, to be honest with you. I need you on Twitter. I need somebody on Twitter I can bounce stuff off of just to antagonize. Because right now I just basically antagonize myself.
Yeah. I just don't have the time for it, man. I can't do it.
You need to make the time for it.
I know. I even stopped doing the Instagram. People were legitimately stealing my stuff, and I wasn't in a position to monetize, and I had to stop. So I get stuck in between. I need people to know about me to reach the monetary goals I want in life and not have to work my whole life. But at the same time, part of why I get the clients I get is because I don't divulge what I'm doing that's creating some of the success. And I just found this like diminishing returns on giving information out. And then the Twitter world, you can't even give information out because nobody wants to hear it. And they're just yelling at each other.
We're not exchanging ideas. We're exchanging insults.
Yeah. And there's like ththese little gangs there's like these pockets of, they only hang out with their crew. It's like high school again. And so they'll only listen to what their crew has to say. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. So I, for my own sanity, have avoided most of the social media baseball world.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because you did say that you understand what everybody's teaching.
Yeah.
Dan blew it. I'm sure you understand a lot of what these velocity guys are teaching around the country. You know, you're not poorly read. You're a well-read guy from everything you say.
Such a well-read fella.
Such a well-read guy. So are there guys that you've pulled stuff from that are in the hitting world that do have these larger than life personas on social media?
Define pulled from.
The things. Let's start with guys that you agree with some of the stuff that they teach.
I've definitely learned some stuff or seen stuff that I agree with. There's nothing that I've seen out there that's strikingly new, and there's nothing that I've seen that it isn't some version of something else that I've already experimented with or seen be effective or seen be ineffective. But no, there's guys that I absolutely agree with on there, and there's guys that have bits and pieces of things that I really like, and then other things they go like, I'm basically like, as they're talking, I'm like, yep, no. So like, there's a lot of guys like that too, where they just maybe, and just because I disagree doesn't mean it's not effective for somebody. My whole thing is like, these guys start arguing with each other about all these different things, and then they say, who have you worked with? That's such a random thing, because someone who works with a power hitter and the guy blows up, what they don't talk about is, I know 8 other professionals that guy worked with that had such bad seasons that their team basically said, if you work with that guy again, we're going to change your contract to the same as skydiving or riding a racing motorcycle. It's that detrimental for you to be working with that guy. So don't do it again. So, the same thing that created one all-star ruined someone else. So it's hard to say, I fully agree with this is how it should be, or I completely disagree with this is how it should be.
Do you see new stuff to you on the web? Like, is anyone like blowing your mind? Is anyone like, wow, I never thought about that, or wow, what an effective like new thing? Where is it kind of like The Simpsons, where you can make new jokes, but The Simpsons already did it?
Yeah, I just feel like baseball's been around for so long, and the game goes in cycles for sure. And the way the breaking balls are taught, or pitch movement in general, starts to show more effective swing patterns for that type of pitching. And then everybody starts to follow that type of swing. And by everybody, I mean like the social media hitting gurus. And so they do all that, and they post a video of a guy succeeding. And now we're going to, there was a while where everybody was doing the Josh Donaldson swing. Everybody was teaching that. There was Jock Peterson for half a year until he started hitting 100. And then it moved on to Aaron Judge. And now it's, Justin Turner and Arenado or whoever else you want. So it changes every year depending on who's doing well, but really it depends on the type of pitching. So Mike Schmidt with a chop down swing would actually be pretty effective against this high spin rate fastball right now. And he would be dominating once again. But if you put him in the era with Maddox, no shot. He doesn't touch Maddox. Now with that swing path, it never lines up. So you just got to figure out what's going on with the pitching and how you can kind of match that.
Yeah,
And
especially
hitting has become a brand. If you don't have a brand, and I think the biggest takeaway for me for the guys on social media is I don't agree with probably 90% of what they're saying, but some of them are saying things differently that will trigger a different thought for myself that will get me to figure it out. So if you've got, like, guys say swing down, get on top of the ball, swing down, that is interpreted 100 different ways by 100 different people. So it's definitely dependent on who you're working with. Some guys you say swing down to the ball. Some guys you say you need to swing under the ball. Some guys you say you need to swing level to the ball. You're probably saying the same thing 20 different ways to get the same result that you're looking for, because your eyes are seeing what needs to happen and they need to feel what needs to happen. And Twitter does not siphon through that information. They say one thing and that's my brand, and that is what got X hitter to the big leagues that I worked with. And I need to ride that guy as long as possible because he's my moneymaker. Kind of how you said, that guy made my money. Was similar to a lot of the pitching guys, and I'm sure in other sports. And I've tried to actually get in other sports like a soccer Twitter or a basketball Twitter, and it's no sport has the level of arrogance in coaching that baseball has. On Twitter,
ego.
It's just unbelievable. Like, everybody needs to have their own buzzwords, their own persona. And I'm still looking for that basketball Twitter guru.
No one wants to talk about basketball.
It's a popular
sport.
It's
so dull. It's so dull. You just run down, you throw the ball in the net. Then the other team runs down and throws it in the other net, and then they do it like 50 times each. Why are we watching this? How is that a sport? You're both teams are throwing the net like 50 times.
And
the team that does it 52 times is the champion. Like, that's a sport.
You're so dated.
Wow. Anyway, did you like how I summed up basketball just like that?
Yeah, spot on too.
Yeah. So Dan, tell me a little bit more, because I'm personally curious. Tell me about the cycle of Instagram, because a lot of people, Instagram is really popular. I personally got I pushed back from it back in like March. I was like, look, I just can't do this anymore. This isn't like my kind of content. It makes me feel guilty that I'm not doing Instagram as a creator, because like you said before, it's important to be known on the web. And so you feel like if you leave anything on the table, like if I don't do Twitter, I'm leaving money on the table. If I don't do this or that. But at a certain point, you're like, I just can't do it all. And some of this really drains me mentally. So can you talk about building your brand on Instagram as a hitting guy, and then also just like where you're at now, and talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, the first maybe 15 videos on my Instagram weren't even me. They were my hitters, but it was my little brother just because he was like, dude, you got to do something. Like, get on social media. So he started just posting. And then I started editing some of the videos and just showing these quick, like, I would say meet whoever was there. And maybe it was a kid named Makai or a pro guy named Matthew or something. And I would say meet Matthew. And then we would go through what we did in that 1 hour. And I was getting pretty good results. And so then more people would want to do it. And then I started realizing that some of the high school kids, they just wanted to be on Instagram. I didn't even realize, I thought they wanted to work with me. They just liked my editing and wanted to be on Instagram with a cool song. So they're on there, and then it starts to blow up a little bit more. And then I did a couple like with a little bit of a sense of humor, and all of a sudden some of the videos were getting, 80,000 views, and I didn't understand what was going on. I worked with a 12-year-old that ended up being on the cover of Time magazine, and he kind of blew up my page a little bit. And then I got the opportunity to work with some pretty big studs that have had a lot of success. A couple of them actually playing in the World Series right now. And but anyway, I started to use. I know we were just bashing buzzwords, but I started to make up my own buzzwords strictly because part of being a hitting coach is you don't have like a 9 to 5. You have your hours that you're working. For instance, today I'm going 12:30 to 8:30 tonight, but you're never done. So at midnight, I might get a text from a frantic father, or I've had guys call me when there's an issue when they go out in an away stadium and then they go to a bar and they got in a fight and they don't want their agent to know about it. I get that text. So there's like all these different things that you become as a hitting coach and as a friend, and almost like a big brother to them sometimes, physically too, because I'm enormous. And so all of that. So anyway, at times when you're texting all these guys, you can't just say like, it's hard sometimes to explain something or use a bunch of words. So I created these buzzwords just to make the texts easier. So I have something called a release scale, and it's just the amount that the wrist has released by the time they made contact. So what number are we at? 0 to 100. And we could dive into that way more, but that was just a quick example. So if a kid says 40, that's way different than, it's just a much quicker way so that both of us can understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I don't even remember where this started.
Well, I want to hear what do you advise this young man who's in the bar fight, who's in trouble? I mean, you're like, find an old car, get the body in the trunk. Yeah. And you're like, who saw it? We need it. Like, what do we do?
Get your hand on ice ASAP. And I gave him the number of a lawyer in case there was going to be any issues. That's exactly what happened. And the lawyer helped him out and he was good. So
it's funny, dude. Like, I always laid pretty low during my career. Like, I just like never really cared about drinking or the bar scene very much. So it was, my exposures to risk were low. Like, I wasn't going out that much. But it's funny how we all have like teammates or just people we know that just like trouble finds them, right? Like, I had a teammate in college. Like, it didn't matter. We went out once a year or once a month. He would get in a fight like literally every time. Like, didn't matter what his frequency was. Just like he found trouble or trouble found him. It was like so bizarre. Even when he was being good, like didn't do anything to anyone, someone would like hit him with a bottle or something, or just like throw something at him. It's like, you're like a magnet you're a magnet for trouble. Yeah. I don't know.
He had a face that everybody wanted to punch.
Everyone.
But no, so I mean, like, so with all that little stuff, I remember where we were headed with it. I started using some buzzwords, and this was like in 2017. And then on Instagram, all of a sudden, I'm seeing guys with like 40,000 followers saying this made up word that I made up a couple, months prior, and like ridiculous things, like serving the pizza pie is something that I would teach little kids. I saw a Mets hitting instructor saying that phrase like a couple months after. I do this thing called the ring, and it's just kind of like this. The ring is a mixture of posture and like the way the torso moves or maintains. It's basically this floating halo around the rib cage, and you play operation with it. Once you land, you can't touch any side of this halo, and if you do, you get zapped. And now I got to explain the game operation to most kids, but so that's the ring is a phrase we use, and maybe the ring is too high or it's tilted too much, or we ran into the front of the ring, stuff like that. All of a sudden, I'm seeing guys talking about the ring, talking about I have this thing called cut the string. And anyway, I was seeing all of this. I wasn't in a position to monetize the way they were. They already had kind of a machine behind them, and they were grabbing stuff, and to the point where I was getting pro guys who were saying like, hey, he's stealing your stuff. And they would send me be in my DM, and I'd get salty and be in the shower, like having these fake arguments with them. So I just said, I'm going to get out of here until I can figure out how to monetize better. And plus the one thing, I don't know if this actually helped me or hurt me, but I would start to get, once things started to really go well on Instagram, I would get comments like, how can I hit with you? And then the comment right underneath would be like, don't even bother. He doesn't have time. And you're like, oh man, that looks bad. So So then I would delete both messages and then DM both of them and tell them to get away from me, never talk to me again. That part isn't true, but no, I just realized I'm not in a position to do what I want to do with this. I didn't enjoy that scene. And so I just got out of it.
Yeah. Well, it really is interesting. Just everyone thinks it's easy to be on these platforms, even once you're successful. But lots of people on Instagram, especially, I think Instagram's hard to monetize, number one. Correct me if I'm wrong. But two, you have to do a new thing every day. It's like handing out a flyer. Like every day you need like a new Instagram post, which was part of the reason I just personally, it's like, this isn't for me. Like I'm better with like longer form stuff, writing and longer video. So I just like couldn't do it. So my Instagram's been dormant for a while.
The move that cracks me up though is the guys that will post one swing of a hitter. They worked with them for an hour and they post that one really nice swing, but that's enough for them to get the views and I just can't do that. I like to edit. I was putting like music that aligned with the cuts and stuff. I really enjoyed all that, but it took a while for a 59-second video, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I got out of it.
When you're giving lessons or working with hitters from 12 to 8 or whatever you're doing to later on today, it doesn't leave much time for, let's go edit this Instagram video for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And hopefully people watch it and somebody DMs me for a lesson. Like you're better off just putting your time into the guys you're already working with and getting people referred to you because you are good at what you do. Thanks, man. Not you or either of you.
Oh, right.
People are good at things and they get referrals.
Right. Gotcha. That makes more sense.
Yeah. Well, and it is hard finding the balance because like you said, if you're always just doing lessons from sun up to sundown, it's hard to get out of that because that's just like working a 9-to-5 job. Ultimately, at some point, you want to find a way to teach your systems and then, you can sell an online course or a book or whatever while you're doing other things because the grind of hitting coaches and pitching coaches, even strength coaches, even when you really love working with people, which I think all of us do, it's still just like it just wears you out after a while. And it's tough to have a social life when you work from 12:30 to 8:30, right? So
that's exactly right. And that's where I'm transitioning as we speak, actually. So no, you're spot on.
Into having a social life?
Yeah, I'm learning. Well, I'm not social enough anyway. Bobby and I, for those listening or watching, we're roommates. We're road roomies in 2013. And Bobby and I were both, we would tuck into bed right around 8:30 p.m. and say our prayers, and we would go to bed.
Bob's the social butterfly of this conversation.
Yeah, Bob
sets the bar low. The bar is set low, but you're definitely it seems like the extrovert of the three of us. But so Dan, you're in Fort Myers and kids throwing 96 at 16.
Yeah.
How do you see young people changing? I mean, are they heavily focused on their metrics and all this stuff? Are they bigger than they used to be 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Like, what is the youth baseball player? What do they look like today? What are they concerned about? And what would you think they should be concerned about if some of those things maybe shouldn't be their primary focus?
Okay, what do they look like? What are they concerned about? What should they begin? They look like grown-ass men. They are well built. I really think it all stems from just they choose something earlier now. Where as small as I was, my first scholarship offer was actually basketball, not baseball, because I was John Stockton meets Allen Iverson. That's who I was. That's who I thought I was in my bedroom, at least. But no, so they pick something way earlier. They chose baseball. This is their thing, and their parents fully buy into baseball. This is their thing, and so they, from an earlier age, look at a professional and say, okay, if that's who I want to be, how can I be that? And they start to act like it sooner, look like it sooner, play like it sooner. So what do they look like? They look bigger, better, stronger, more professional, much younger. Even their, pre-at-bat approach. I just walked up to the plate, dragged my bat, holding by the knob, and picked it up and tried to hit. These guys got a full routine. They're popping the chain. They're professional from a super early age, for better or worse. What are they focused on? They're focused on getting to say what their ranking is, whether that be a perfect game ranking or what college they're committed to or what PBR has them ranked on their latest showcase. They're concerned about the amount of followers they have on social media and just what they look like. They're very concerned about their appearance. And what should they be focused on? They should be developing a competitive mindset that and to the point where they should be strategizing on what it takes at the position that they're most likely going to play to reach the highest level. What that looks like currently, where things seem to be shifting, and how they can not only match that level or surpass it, but how they can be enough of a savage to move the people that seem to be in their way out of their way, how they can compete and win. I don't see enough of. I don't see the heavy competitiveness. What I will say is at that level, I did notice a little bit of what I felt in minor league ball, where you have a good game, you can feel someone else on your own team being like, nice game, dude. They are not happy that you just had a good game because they can feel like, oh, that's not good. That means I have to have an even better game tomorrow because we play the same position. So I'm in the way of their dream and they're in the way of my dream. You can see that at 16 years old now with some of these national teams because depending on, how that guy does against Velo, he might not play the next game. And a scout was there to watch him, but now he's not playing because he just struggled that game and the other dude went 2 for 3. So stuff like that, I think they need to continue to – they got to get used to it because that's how it is. It's cutthroat. So I think the competitiveness is where the focus should be, learning how to win.
I don't think people understand that what you said about professional baseball, like it goes against all your better instincts of playing as a team, trying to win, being successful with each other. It's not, it's almost the complete opposite because everybody that's sitting next to you in that locker room is essentially your competition. It's not the other team. The other team is not who you need to beat to make it where you want to go. It's the guy sitting next to you. So it's a weird tug of war between you're friends with all those guys, and it's got to be even tougher for younger kids, 16, 17 years old, to see kids around them doing well that are wearing the same jersey, but knowing that they're also essentially taking food off of their plate, for a lack of a better term. That's their competition is the guys on their own team, not the guys across the diamond, which is difficult to, and to use Dan's basketball analogy, you're not trying to beat the other guys throwing balls and hoops. You're trying to beat the guys on your own team.
Yeah.
It's poor use of my analogy. Don't steal my analogies again. Thank you.
This is I'm stealing your buzzwords.
That wasn't
you
a
gotta
buzzword.
get off Instagram now.
That was just a very rudimentary way of analyzing basketball, but I stand by it. Yeah. So do you feel like that has a long-term negative effect on these kids? Like, do you think they can develop the competitiveness that all of us, developed as younger players, or are they just kind of stuck in that routine? Because if you're, competing against your teammates, just like in pro ball, when you're not in pro ball, is there ever like a way out?
Well, I think there's 2 things. One, I have seen there's a kid on the taxi squad with the Mariners right now. He has every possible tool, and I don't see him making it. And I've told him this until he can change his mindset, because he's so focused. We could be working alone, and he's just absolutely killing it. A 12-year-old could walk into the gym, and you'll see him look over, and he like perks up, he like postures up, and like changes who he is. And now he's trying to impress this other human, and that human doesn't care, but he feels this like burden. And I truly believe, I know we're getting psychological here, but I truly believe it's stemming from the social media world of like, they're constantly on Snapchat. They're constantly on Instagram. Or whatever the newest thing is going to be, TikTok. And so there's like, they're almost taught from an early age how to like, what to look like, how to be cool with everything they're doing. And it doesn't leave them just because they got signed. So I think that I don't know how to remove that from them. But what I have had some success with is just doing, just showing them what competitiveness looks like and what a winner looks like. I've been sending guys, there's this hilarious video of Larry Bird and his trash talk stories. But to trash talk like he did and back it up, he was trash talking because he had worked on that thing long enough, and he was able to assess that defender and say, okay, that defender can't physically or mentally stop me from getting to my spot. And once I get to my spot, I've worked on that long enough to execute. And that's not a whole lot different than a hitter, running his mouth or talking trash or being really cocky about something, where some guys are just cocky to be cocky. And that doesn't make you any better. But when you know exactly what you're trying to execute and you're capable of executing it, and then you see a pitcher that doesn't have a specific thing that can beat you or prevent you from executing, you should be cocky and you should have this killer mentality and showing guys what that looks like, because a lot of them don't even know what that looks like. I have had some success with that with guys changing, but it's not a perfect thing that I haven't found the perfect recipe yet, and I'm still in search of that.
Yeah, I kind of got like a flashback to like backyard baseball where, sometimes your buddy just like can't possibly throw past you or just like can't get you to swing and miss at their breaking ball. Like it just isn't enough. Like you can wait on something else and still not get beat by it. Kind of feels like that same thing. It is a good place.
Latin American guys are all friends with each other. Like those guys are, they want to see each other succeed, at least outwardly, but their competitiveness is to be successful personally. I mean, I don't want to say selfish, because baseball is essentially always a selfish game. You're always trying to be selfish and perform well, but like selfishly, these guys want to play, like they want to be paid, and everything else happening around them is insignificant, which might take away from the team aspect of baseball that a lot of us in the States are used to, try and win as a team, we before I, or we before me. But
I before E except after C.
Proper grammar, Dan. Blew it. Proper grammar. But the competitiveness with some of these guys is going to shape the rest of their lives, so they have to be uber competitive. They have to strive to be the best guy. Whereas some of the kids, I'll use my program, for example, if they don't go to play college baseball, their parents have saved for college. They're going to go to a good school. They're going to get a good education. They're going to come out with it. It's not so much of not necessarily life or death, but it's not so much of a rich or poor with a lot of kids. And you see it everywhere. I mean, the people that come from nothing have the biggest impact in their sports. Like it's cyclical, right? Like Mike Tyson, you look at all these guys that are super successful. Most of them come from struggled backgrounds, maybe not personally, but financially, or when they're coming up, they went through some hardships and they're shaped who they are. It's hard to not naturally instill that in somebody.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that is, and I agree with everything you just said. I think a lot of that is organically groomed in them out of necessity, whether it be the Latin guy or it be Mike Tyson. There's no plan B. There's no safety net. So they fully buy in. And you're right. Right when you started telling that story about some of the guys not worried about whether or not they play college ball, I immediately can think of a kid who's a really good ball player, an excellent fielder, solid hitter, and D1 player. But he's got such a safety net with his family and his upbringing that it's just like there's no fire, there's no competitiveness. So you're right. I'm still searching. I still believe that there is a solution, and maybe it's a different solution for each guy. But that has been my latest thing, that especially with the minor league guys, where the moment I can get them to buy into that, they go into spring and they're just like meaner than the guys around them, and they really start to differentiate themselves. And I think that's the ticket ultimately. That, and knowing I've been trying to really find exactly what each, and sometimes that's the agent, sometimes it's the organization, but find exactly what's going to get that player from that organization to continue to bump up. And actually, it was a White Sox first rounder, Gavin Sheets, who was the first guy that I realized, like, okay, it's not just about that hitter succeeding. It's about that hitter succeeding the way that that organization wants them to succeed. And so that's where I have to really differ my teachings from hitter to hitter. So it's a psychological game, and then it's also like this. I have to appease the right people to make sure this guy gets his opportunity to get paid.
So before we leave the mental topic that we were talking about, what does humble mean to you, and where do you find that word needs to, or where do you find being humble needs to be a part of an athlete's persona? So I'll give you an example. A buddy of mine went to, a guy who pitched in pro ball in the major leagues for a little bit. He went to a college and spoke to their players. And one of the questions, like, they were being real quiet, weren't really asking many questions. And one of the questions that they asked him were like, how do you stay humble? And he's like, it pissed him off. He's like, I'm here to give you my experience as a high level pitcher, and you're asking me how to stay humble? Like, what's wrong with you? But anyway, what does humble mean to you, and should athletes be humble? And if so, what does it look like?
Humble in the baseball world? What does it mean to me? I guess humble means like not flamboyant with your actions or your success, not rubbing in anybody's face. I think the right version of humble, it would be like what the Art of War talks about, where you never really disrespect your opponent. You always accept the fact that that person can beat you on any given day, and you understand and you take the time to figure out how that person could beat you, and you make sure that that doesn't happen. So I think that would be humble in the right way, where you never overlook your opponent. Humble in the wrong way would be afraid to beat the people around you, afraid to make someone else look bad. And I think that's weak. And I struggle with that, because I could have buried Bobby multiple times in 2013 and I just didn't. I let him feel good about himself, and I regret that to this day. But
we all have our regrets.
I know.
You've been carrying that burden for 7 years now.
Finally got it off my chest.
No, that's a good point. And I've been actually working on a mindset thing. So I was actually on that topic yesterday, and I think kids misunderstand this, because I think parents rightly want to raise kids who are humble, right? But you don't take that onto the field. Like, there is no being humble on the field, except for, I think what you said was very apt, which is respecting your opponents and all that stuff. And I think also redirecting praise, right? So like, you see the star athlete, put up 60 points in a basketball match, and they're asking him about it. And he's like, well, like, our coaching staff's done such a great job. This guy had an amazing game. This guy's been pushing us all year long. Like, the team, they talk about the team, right? They redirect the success that they've had to other people. But on the field, I feel like too many kids lack this. I'm going to bury this dude. I'm going to make, and I've had this thought many, many times. Like, I'm going to punch out this guy 3 times today, and I hope he gets released because of me. Like, I had that thought many times on the mound. That's not humble. That's not nice. It's not kind. But during the game, it needs to be that. And afterwards, it can be something different. But I find that kids carry this humble attitude. Like, oh yeah, there's guys better than me. No, there's not. Not during a game. There's not. You're the only one.
Hey, did you guys see The Last Dance? I know Dan blew it. You were watching a little bit of it.
I watched it. I enjoyed it.
Did you see it?
Yeah.
So
I should say I watched it in the sense of a playbook, not in the sense of entertainment. Like, I really watched it with, how can I get this mindset? Because I already knew Jordan had it. That's not a question. But to learn how he did it, and just get a little better insight into some of that stuff.
Did you get any? Can you howl someone else's mindset?
Yeah, I mean, they talk pretty often about how competitive the father would pit him and the brothers against each other, like, which, created love, I'm sure, but it also created a lot of probably like mini traumas, and eventually creates this hardened competitor that freaks out if he loses. Terry Francona has a story when they're playing basketball, and Francona was like, all right, we got to get out the gym. And he picks up the ball and shoots. Jordan had a freak out and was like, I take the last shot. I take that. Francona was like, you don't take the last shot until you can hit a curveball. But the whole point was Jordan was that competitive that he made that last shot, and some other person tried to pick up his basketball and take another shot. You out of your mind? And like just those little things like that, as crazy as psycho as that sounds, I think there is learning tools in there, and just little competitive tidbits.
I think it's pretty evident when you watch the in-game footage. You know, like he gets interviewed after he loses to the Pistons, or he loses, you know, or he wins an award, and he's not bashing anybody. He's like, you know, they fought hard. It was their day. You know, we got to get better. We got to compete. And it sounds like what you would want a professional athlete to say, like show respect for your opponent. And then transition into Charles Barkley got the MVP in '93, and they're asking Jordan about it, and he's like, okay, now it's personal. Like he manifested something against somebody else to overcome it, because talent-wise, he was always better. He was always better than everybody else. But he needed an edge. Like you could tell it was getting like stale. That's why he went to play baseball, at least according to him. Like it was getting stale. He was just beating the crap out of everybody. So when he came back, he started to you know, I'm sure he did it before, but he's talking about manifesting, you know, something out of nothing. Competition where there was no competition, you know, an edge, you know, somebody said you're looking across across the court and looking at the guy guarding you, and this guy said something about my wife or my sister, or like he's manifesting things that aren't in real life, and it's putting him in this headspace that's uncontrollably competitive.
Yeah, well, and for me, I always think so. Say you got to witness exactly how, you know, Michael Jordan grew up, and you like took notes. The thing is, if you did that same thing to 100 people, you don't get 100 Michael Jordans. You get one, you still get one. So it's almost like there's things you can do, but it's hard to know what's actually because I mean, what I took away from The Last Dance was, of all the NBA players, incredibly competitive people, he was the most competitive and like hyper focused at the right times compared to all of them, which is why he was who he was, like the most recognizable human on the planet at that period of time. But it's so weird to think that at the highest levels, where the difference between one player and another is nothing, that he was like just significantly better than everyone else. It's like Usain Bolt, where he was just so much faster than everybody else. Like that was so not normal, right? Everyone's winning a gold medal by 100th of a second, 200ths of a second. And then Usain Bolt comes along and blows people out by just an enormous margin. And it's just really strange when that happens, especially when you feel like it's a more controllable factor, like mentality, which it was really interesting. But have you either guys read the book by, he was Jordan's trainer, yeah. Tim Grover?
Tim Grover, yeah.
Cool.
I really disliked that book. But Dan, what was your takeaway of it?
Well, so I was always using animals as my analogy, and I like the three that he talks about. He talks about the cooler, the closer, and the cleaner. And for those listening, each one has a little bit of a different personality, and each one has a different value or the way that they get themselves going. One guy kind of is like the hype man. He's dancing in the clubhouse. He's the one who, when there's an alley-oop, he throws his jersey up in the air. He's the crazy guy. He's Willie Adames for the Rays. If you watch him after, he's got a celebration with every single player on that team. And then another one is a guy who more just hypes himself up. That was me. I actually created the pitcher, the catcher, and the umpire were always against me. That's what I put in my head. And I would get a hit and I would be cursing at all three of them. And especially in college where I was more successful and I was also less afraid to be myself, which is something I regret in pro ball. But in college, I would lead the game off with a hit pretty often or get on base. And I would be telling the pitcher, like, it's all effing day. It's all day. How many innings you going? Not today. And if I knew that a kid, and then I'd steal second and I'd be wiping dirt off and I would just like try my best to lock eyes with the catcher and just like let him know, like, your arm ready? Is your arm ready for today? And that was just, and the catcher had no idea what was going on. Half the time he didn't look me in the eye because he didn't he didn't care. He was just in his own world. But I'm creating these like things. If I knew a scout there was for that pitcher, I would try to drop him down as many rounds as I possibly could. If he was supposed to be a 5th rounder, by the end of the day, if he was a 15th rounder, that's a win for me. So I needed that. So that was the other type of person. That's more like who's like that. A lot of closers are like that. You'll see them just like really get themselves going. Like they're like, oh, ready to attack. Farnsworth would be a great example of that. Just screaming at himself. And then the final is just sort of this cerebral dominance where they don't really need outside. They just create it within and they can affect everybody in some powerful way. That's a Kawhi Leonard. That's a Michael Jordan. But the reason I don't like that book is because I think it's far more nuanced than that. Because where does Tim Duncan fall in that? Tim Duncan is one of the most dominant players of all time, but he's not mean. He often compliments the other guy and tells him, hey, next time, if you just try this with your elbow, you'll get better leverage on me. And so keep working, kid, stuff like that. But then he would also, put up 30 points on you and 12 rebounds. So he doesn't really fall into that category. I feel like a Curt Schilling, who was someone that was super calculated on how he pitched to people, one of the most dominant playoff pitchers of all time, he doesn't really fall into any of the categories that he talked about. So there's things that I took from that book, but there's also things that, I think, and maybe that's just an editing thing where the editor was like, listen, you can't have 12 different examples. We got to bring it down to 3. I don't know. But anyway.
Yeah, that book fell flat for me because it was just like, to me, it's just stories of guys that fit those 3 things and like nothing actionable whatsoever of like how you can actually improve your mindset. It's like, all right, cool, dude. Kobe Bryant's awesome. Thanks. Like good book. Michael Jordan's better than he'll ever be. He's got a mindset that I like will never have. Awesome. Appreciate you. Like it was just like the most, like fundamentally useless book after just hearing cool stuff, which can get you fired up. Like, great. It's always great to hear about what other people do. But at the same time, do you have any way of cultivating this, or are you just telling me that there's awesome people that exist?
Right. And I think that's where I had to try to take his stuff and what he valued or what he found common within all these studs. And I had to try to come up with my own way. Because you're right, he doesn't really give it to you. And I still haven't come up with it, but no, you're right. But I will say I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed the Audible because whoever reads it gets me fired up. I don't know who that guy is, but he reads it so well. I start punching in the air. Red lights, some boxing red lights.
Dan, I think you touched on something that I want to go back to. It's that little bit of self-doubt that probably everybody experiences where you're like, I wish I would have done that in pro ball. Like, I wish I would have been myself in pro ball. Like, you got to that level for a reason, right? Like, you fought your way to that level. And then we've all played at that level, the professional level. At some point, there's self-doubt creeps in, whether it's can I compete at this level? Am I done at this level? Whatever it has to be. You're struggling, I'm just not good enough at this level. And to transition back to a little bit of the Michael Jordan, I feel like he never had that self-doubt. Like, there was never self-doubt in that guy. And they reference Kobe Bryant, and outwardly, at least from a distance, it probably doesn't seem like he ever had that self-doubt, or he never showed it. And I think controlling that self-doubt, because you see it, I work with youth guys a lot more than I work with pro guys. You see self-doubt all the time. Like, these kids have, as much as they want to be inclusive and they're further along maturity-wise than maybe we were at that age in some aspects, there's a lot more self-doubt. Like, there's not as much blind confidence in their talent. Even when they are, talking about these kids in Fort Myers that are uber talented and they're going to be the best of the best, in 10 years, you can tell the kids that have a little bit of self-doubt, and it holds them back. It definitely holds them back a little bit. And you have to fight through that somehow.
Yeah. Barry Bonds had no doubt, that in my opinion, I still think he's the greatest hitter of all time, steroids or not. There's a lot of guys at Planet Fitness that are taking steroids that can't do what Barry Bonds did. But anyway, he has that famous quote of like, what do you do when you're in a slump? And I don't slump. That's his confidence level. I don't slump. I'm Barry Bonds. I don't slump. So like that there's no self-doubt there. Yeah. And I guess going back to what you started with me, if you go on to Baseball Reference and you look at my horrendous numbers, you will see, if that's even possible, For the first 2 weeks to the month of every professional season I had, I was hitting over 400. So I went into the season training, felt pretty good about myself, go into the season with kind of a blank canvas, dominant for a very short period of time. And by dominant, I mean soft liners over the second baseman's head and good defense. But by month 3, I'm hitting 250 to 220. And so what happened? Every single year, the same thing. And I had a bad game, then I have a second bad game, and then I'm like, oh no, here we go. I got to change everything. I got to figure out what's going on. And then you start talking to people. You get 3 different voices in your head. This guy, he played in the big leagues, and he just told me I should do this, so I got to do this. He told me I should switch my bat size. I'm going to switch my bat size now. And that all stems from lack of confidence and also this willingness. You want to appear coachable, and you want to reach the levels that someone else reached. And without having a concise roadmap and a logical reason why you're doing what you're doing, you just take on whatever you just heard. And so by the end of month 3, I don't even remember what I was doing month 1 where I was hitting 400. And this is, I'm going to brag here. Here we go. I have freakish hand-eye coordination to the point where in my senior year of college, I didn't swing and miss at a ball once. And my I don't know if it was my first or second year in with the Somerset Patriots, Lancaster Barnstormers or York Revolution got me to swing and miss at a pitch. This was in a day game. And I swung and missed. That was my first swing and miss of the year. And it was probably in the second or third month. And their whole pen, who was on the right field line, threw their gloves up. And the catcher said to me, because they started laughing, the catcher was laughing, and the pitcher like fist pumped. This is strike 1. And he threw a really good changeup, and they had these 2 white barn houses in center field. In day games, you could see the barn house and you couldn't see the ball. And so he threw a changeup, and I swung and missed. And the catcher told me we had a money pool. We would put money in a hat until we got you to swing and miss. So this is coming from someone who has freakish hand-eye coordination and still sucked. So, and by sucked, I mean low 200s, mid 200s every single year. Sucked. That's not good enough. And that's, again, coming from someone that can basically touch any ball they want to touch, and I still wouldn't have good numbers. So listening to every single person and what they have to say about something is detrimental. I should have been a little meaner. I should have been more comfortable telling people, I understand what you're saying, thank you, but I feel pretty good right now, or I think I have a plan, but thanks, stuff like that. And the more I talk to guys, like Josh Donaldson has this story. He was working with Bobby Tewksbury for a while, and Bobby and I did a couple speeches together, and Donaldson was telling the story about when he was with the A's, and he kept getting pushed down to AAA big leagues. Finally, he told the AAA guy, like, he was like, all right, what are we working on this time? And he said, we're not working on anything. I have a plan here, and I'm gonna go for it because this is like, I got to try for myself one time. And then he became the household name he eventually became. But I never had that confidence to say something like that. So yeah, the self-doubt is real, and how to get rid of it, I think, is telling stories like what I just told, what you told, and letting guys understand, like, hey, you're gonna feel this stuff, but you have to have a weapon to get out of it, and you have to have a couple anchors. And by anchors, I mean things that you know matter for your success. And if someone gives you information as insightful and beautiful as it might sound, if it doesn't pertain to your anchors, why are you taking that information? And that's not making you any better. If anything, it's getting you further away from them, and eventually you're just going to sail away and forget what you were doing.
So yeah, that's a hard, really good.
Yeah, it's a hard place to be in to figure out when you can actually reject advice and when you should try it, because being coachable and open-minded, you're like, oh, I should try that. But at some point, you're right. You have to like kind of close the door in people's faces. Is that what you're going to say, Bobby? Were you going to agree, Bobby?
I'm not with you. Never.
He was just going to compliment me, I think.
I was going to compliment Dan, and I was also going to add on to his mindset is you start the season hot, 400, and when you're playing in pro ball, it's about getting consistent ABs. It's about being in the lineup every day and hopefully getting picked up and moved up. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan Hennigan, were you ever slotted as the starter for any of those years? Or were you
just when I with Camden?
Okay,
River
so that
Sharks.
was later. And for anyone listening, look up Dan's career. That was a little bit later, right? That wasn't your first year.
No, that was my fourth.
Okay, so the first 3 years as a guy, and I've been in this mindset before, you start out hot and you're still not in the lineup every day. You feel like, okay, I got to change something, right? I need to somehow, the next rung of being a part-time player is being a full-time player. And the next rung of being a full-time guy in independent ball is getting picked up and being an affiliated ball. Well, if you can't, if 400 isn't good enough or starting out that hot isn't good enough to get you a full-time guy, then that self-doubt creeps in and, okay, I need to do something different. And then you lose all sense of self when what you were doing is very successful. Stick with it. And Dan Blewett, I'm sure you've gone through this on the pitching side, and I know I've done it myself in affiliated ball, where you're fighting like an internal struggle of what everyone else expects from you and what works and what is successful for yourself. And it's being stubborn to, how do you be coachable and also stubborn in the fact that you know yourself better than everybody else?
Yeah, and it's tough to know when to, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Dan, too. It's hard to know when to change and when not to change. That's one of, I think, the most really difficult decisions you can make. So for me, in my last 3 seasons, I hit like a 2 to 3 week slump each of those seasons. Of course, my last season was just a sort of a train wreck, but during those slumps, as they endure, you're like, is this just variance, right? Am I just having bad luck? Are line drives not finding holes? Or my at bats, am I just getting beat sometimes and I shouldn't change my approach? Or is it actually time where I actually do need to make an adjustment to my swing? Or do I actually need to change my approach? Like, when do you actually need to change when you're not playing your best? My last year in Long Island, I was like hurt enough where my stuff was diminished, but not hurt enough where I had to come out of the game. So I wasn't getting people out, and I started to get a lot of, oh, you should do this. Why don't you throw a sinker? Why don't you, pitch away more? All things that never, ever worked for me. But since I was struggling, I was like, maybe a sinker would help me right now, because other stuff is different and things aren't working as well. And then you just get really lost. And that's where I was, and at different points. But my 2 previous seasons, when I was doing well, I just forged right through those slumps. I was like, I'm very sure I'm throwing the ball well. I'm very sure I'm just in a rough patch. Sometimes you just get hit. I'm very sure that if I keep doing my thing, keep throwing the ball well, the results will eventually improve. And they did. But Dan, how do you know when you should change and when you shouldn't?
Well, I wish there was an easy answer, like a one size fits all, but there's just not. So certain guys, like for instance, I got flown to San Diego, and there was a catcher with them, Austin Barnes, and I think he hit 179 the last full season, and this year he was just as porous. And I got pretty good video of his movements, and they're solid. He's got a better swing than a lot of guys that are hitting 280. So does that guy need swing adjustments? Maybe little ones, but should he be trying to make swing adjustments mid-season? Probably not. I think his approach was horrendous. He was swinging at balls way out of the zone, chasing everything. So I think someone like that, once you look at the context, you can see, okay, this guy needs an approach adjustment and maybe just a complete mindset overhaul. And then you look at somebody else who looks like they're on time. A Nick Ahmed would be an example of that, in my opinion. So that's a really good defensive middle infielder for the Diamondbacks. That dude's swing just isn't good enough yet, and it's getting there. But I think he has great at-bats, and I think he does some really impressive stuff. He just, when his bat touches a ball, cool things don't happen because he's not he doesn't collide with the ball in a way that gives him good results. And so that person, they could mid-season switch some things up with their minds. And then there's other guys where, and this was my biggest thing, they're hitting the ball well, they're squaring it up, and they're just getting out. And then they start changing, and you're like, dude, don't touch a thing. You can't control the fact that center fielder was playing in a weird spot and just made a diving play on you. Your 0 for 3 was 3 rockets. Stop it. So those are the 3 different things. Sometimes the swing is money. Don't touch it. Your mindset or your approach or your vision just sucks. Other guys, your approach is money. Don't touch it, but your swing sucks. And then other guys, don't touch a thing. Just trust what you're doing. And to know that, it's so different for each person. But I know I failed with that. Even the year that I finally got the opportunity, and Bobby put it perfect. The independent route is establish a role for yourself once you've established that role, prove that it's valuable to an affiliated program, and let them sign you from there. And that's the year that I got picked up offensively was I think my worst year, but I was playing shortstop almost every game. My arm was really strong that year, and defensively I was a monster that year. I was making a bunch of web gems. I had Pedro Feliz come out to me after a game and make me show him how I was doing certain things and all this cool stuff. And so I finally got that opportunity. But that year I started off that first week with I can still vividly remember a couple line drives where the center fielder did that thing where they just kind of crouch down, they don't move, and then they catch it. And I hit 3 or 4 like that. And that's a really good result to hit a rocket right at the center fielder where they don't have to move. But I started changing things because I was getting out. And it's just such a common story for so many guys who struggle. So yeah, that brings us all the way back to the confidence.
Yeah. Do you have a hard hit? Do you have a hard hit ball chart, or is there anything you suggest that young hitters do where they can track because for example, say you have 10 games and you hit one hard hit ball you're 1 for 3 with a hard hit ball in all 10 of those games. You have the potential to hit 333 out of those 10 games, which is a good stretch, right? But sometimes the line drive's caught, maybe 3 out of the 10 it's caught, and the other 7 it goes through for a hit. So you only got 7 hits out of your 30 at bats, and so you're only hitting 240. What advice is there? Anything tangible, actionable that you give to players to help them understand how they're actually doing?
Yeah. So I have, and I can't divulge all of it, but I do have a lot of guys have a hitting velo that they want, or an exit velo, or basically how hard the ball comes off the bat in a game. And so there's that, and they're looking for hey, we got to be triple digits, man. We got to get to 100. And then they have a launch angle. Let's get to 35. And at 100 miles per hour, 35 degrees, we're going to do some really cool stuff. Well, that's great, but at no point in my life will I hit a ball consistently 100 miles per hour. So if that ends up being 94 when I really square something up, or 96, and I'm at 30 degrees, that's a fly out. So what I do is I really define with that hitter, especially with the pro guys, because most of them, for the most part, have physically peaked. Now they could get a little stronger, but all of them take their body very serious. They take their nutrition very serious, and their flexibility, mobility. So there's not going to be, unless there's an obvious momentum or ground force or kinetic chain issue where they just aren't using their body well enough to make the bat move faster. A lot of them already swing really hard and they're really strong. So we're not going to get any higher velos. So then we look at, okay, at that velo, where is that ball going to typically land? And then we will adjust the type of game that they're going to play. So certain guys, I do need to bring the launch angle down. And it's not we need to be at 12 degrees here, but I show them, when you consistently hit a ball like this, physics doesn't lie. And so that's where the ball lands. And then from there, we can start to play these 2 or 3 man games. And just to give you an example, the Astros did a great job of it. Carlos Correa and George Springer did it, where the Rays put 4 guys on the left side of the infield, and they both punched it through the second base gap, kind of like a massive 4 hole that the Rays leave open. And so that was a 1-man game they were playing. Correa was playing against one guy, and often it was G-Man Choi, which I love G-Man. It's awesome to watch that guy, but he's not the defensive guy you're worried about. So when you can play a 1-man game against a first baseman, there's a good chance if you understand angles and how to attack that ball, it's tough for him to cover all that ground. A 3-man game would be a man on first, 1 out, and you got the second baseman in double play depth. You got the first baseman covering. So now you have this massive 4 hole, and then you got the right fielder. So can we play as a lefty? Can we play to the pool side and try to play this 3-man game, me versus those 3? I'm not competing against the pitcher, the catcher, the umpire. I'm competing against the first baseman, second baseman, and right fielder. And what point of contact can we grab on that ball that gives us that direction and the way that ball can come off in a way that can be hit? So yes, there's absolutely very tangible things that physics doesn't lie about. Now, as far as once we explain that, then we dive immediately into just feels and games within the game that give them that stuff. So earlier we were talking about the top knuckle. That's a game within the game. Pitcher doesn't know that the hitter is trying to hit the top knuckle of a baseball. He probably doesn't even know what that means. But the hitter is playing that game within the game. So there's an easy feel for that person that hopefully gives them the results that we know are optimal for that player. So again, going back to Camden, I had really dove into driving the ball and hitting mechanics, and I was someone who could always have pretty good body awareness. So if you taught me something new, I would literally do what you taught me. And so I did a lot of these teachings that pros were working with, and anyway, I ended up just flying out a bunch. A lot of good barrels, but they were flyouts. For someone else, that ball was way out. So that was a bad game for me. So to get back to your question, yeah, there are tangible things you can do, and that's something that I feel has really given me a lot of success most recently. It has nothing to do with the mechanics, but just kind of angles in the way bat and ball can communicate with each other once you know the game you want. I got a kid with the Astros right now that's going to be in the big leagues, and awesome mindset. But he is someone whose mechanics the Astros hate, but he constantly gets to his spots, I call them, which is just where he's making contact. And he's just dominating people. They just did their training camp thing for some of the younger guys. He had a bunch of triples. He was facing a guy throwing 100, and he went poolside homer and stuff. And anyway, and his mechanics aren't great, but he's getting to good spots, and he knows what his good points of contact result in. So a lot of times he can make contact and just kind of put his head down and run to second base because he knows it's a double already. And that's kind of something I'm really proud of.
So when you're working with guys, let's say varsity high school or above, kids that are facing some decent velocity, what are you telling them about two-strike approach? Are you changing anything approach wise, or what's the mindset there for you as far as teaching to, let's say, better hitters?
Well, I don't like this new wave of a strikeout is the same as any other out. I don't like it. And I feel that the teams that are able to get two-strike hits, which you've seen in the playoffs, are teams that are winning. And so I do believe in trying to, I don't want to say shorten up, but be more prepared to touch a ball versus to just swing out of your shoes. And so what I teach is different weight distribution things. And you can do these same weight distributions with a no stride, like a Daniel Murphy or a Juan Soto pretty often, or get the toe down really early and then kind of turn it into a no stride, like a Nelson Cruz, or with a leg kick and a hover, like a Trevor Story, like a Luke Voigt. And they all have the same weight distribution. So all these guys arguing about like what the back leg's doing and what the front side should be doing, and all these arguments you see, a lot of them are actually talking about the same stuff. They just only were taught to teach it one way and don't realize that the other person's actually teaching the exact same ground force and exact same weight distribution. It's just moving a little differently. So anyway, once you understand how the body can kind of move and set itself up and then hold and still create some type of force, you can get down early or prep yourself earlier than you usually do and be in a position to touch a ball. And I'm a firm believer in being able to touch a ball with two strikes. I actually teach a lot of guys to shrink the strike zone, and I got that from Corey Hart, who had a couple pretty big years with the Brewers. Tall, blonde dude, if you guys remember him. But I work with his son, and they're in Arizona, and we'll have pretty good talks. And he would talk about how that whole team really, Prince Fielder always had a 400-plus on-base percentage, and he was on that Brewers team. And he would say, like, a lot of times they shrank the zone once they had two strikes, because those nibble pitches are usually fastballs that like were either dotted up and you got to try to fight them off anyway, or it's a pitch that was never meant to be a strike and it's a good slider or a good changeup that looks like that nibble strike and ends up falling off. So once they shrank the zone, it actually made their at-bats with two strikes cleaner. And I know we don't have the time to really dive into that, but yeah, I have them really lock in on the middle of the zone and be able to kind of feed off of that, because even if your brain is set up for the middle, once the pitches start, you're going to attack pitches that are a little bit outside of that middle anyway, and that ends up being the edges. So that's been effective. And then just being in a position where you can control body weight and compete. So Randy Rosarino was talking about how his brain thinks curveball, but his hands think fastball. I think it's a beautiful little sentiment because he's prepared for the speed of a fastball, but he's also like aware of what all the other things that could be coming. And I think different versions of that, no matter how you have to say it to someone, is so valuable with two strikes. The best compliment I ever got was when Brad Penny, who was was Brad Penny in the Atlantic League for a second?
Was he? I don't remember. Him
I don't know. I'm not sure. I want to say yes, but I don't remember.
Brad Thompson?
Brian Thompson, yeah. That's my dude, Brad Thompson. But I swear it's Brad Penny. Penny, not the big chubby Brad Penny, the heavy sinker ball Brad Penny. Anyway, he told me after a game one time, like, dude, I hate seeing you in the on-deck circle because immediately my brain goes to like, I got to throw 12 more pitches and I wanted to throw this inning. And I took that as a compliment, mainly because I sucked. But me giving them that hard of a time and knowing that even when they got 2 strikes on me, that wasn't a punch out, I took that as a compliment. Now imagine that same feeling that a pitcher gets with a hitter that's actually dangerous, unlike what I was. That's dangerous. That's scary. And that's what I think makes Juan Soto so absolutely dominant, is because he has a real 2-strike approach versus like an Austin Meadows who's up there just hacking.
Yeah, Lou Ford was kind of like that in the Atlantic League. Even though he wasn't like ultra dangerous, Lou Ford was fun to pitch against because it brought the best in you, but he was, if it really mattered, he was going to take you 10 pitches deep in the at-bat for sure. And if you left one over the middle of the zone, he was going to hit it hard.
That's a guy who was ended up playing in the playoffs with the Orioles.
Mm-hmm. When he was like 58 years old too. Yeah.
He's still playing, is he not?
He might be. I mean, it's not hard to see why. Like, you can hang around when you just consistently have really quality at bats, right? Even as your bat speed slows, he's in his 40s, still just has great at bats and eventually gets a good pitch that he can hit, right? He couldn't, maybe put a ball out oppo anymore on the pitch on the black, like maybe he could when he was younger, but he's just going to say, all right, I'm just going to wait till I get one out or half, and then I'm going to put it in the right field gap or whatever. So, yeah. If only you had the pop, Dan, go Oppo Taco after you're on your 13th pitch of the at-bat.
Right.
It's not in the cards for you.
Not in the cards. My launch angle is in there.
Yeah. So, Dan, where can people find you on the web? What are you doing out there where they can learn more about you and your message?
brainandbarrelhitting.com would be how to find me right now. Go on my Instagram. You'll learn some stuff. You're not going to see anything for a little bit, but in a couple months, I developed something that we touched upon a little bit with understanding what type of hitter you are. And I got some financing for it. And so we're really going to push it coming 2021. And so stay on the Brain and Barrel awareness, because the marketing push is coming. And if you want to work with me, I'm not easy to get a hold of, so I apologize, but I DM me or go through the proper channels on my website. You'll see the contact me page.
Well, very good, Dan. This is a great conversation. We'll have to have you back on again. I think we're going to plan a hitting roundtable, so we'll have to have you in it.
I'm down.
Just a guy who just throws down with everyone else.
Just daggers.
Yeah, and we need to have your co-conspirator Kenny on the show at some point to talk about your other endeavor, the King of the Hill. Yeah, that's pretty fun. The Expert Summit. So, but it's obviously been great talk. We appreciate your time. Bobby, do you want to send our good friend Dan on his way?
Henny, appreciate it. I'll be in touch with you shortly here. We'll wreck on Dan Blewett.
All right.
On our free time.
I've talked to both of you enough today, so that's fine.